The real estate agent's key didn't even turn all the way before I heard it. A small voice from somewhere inside the building saying, "Is someone finally here?" I froze on the front steps of the old Millbrook Elementary building, keys in one hand, a coffee going cold in the other. The school had been abandoned for 6 years, sold at auction for a fraction of its worth because nobody wanted a crumbling brick building with asbestos flagged in the inspection report. I wanted it anyway. Cheap square footage, good bones, a project I could turn into affordable live-work lofts after I'd lost almost everything else that mattered to my old life. My name's Renata Okafor. I'm 41, from Dayton, Ohio, and 8 months before that morning I'd walked away from a 20-year marriage with a settlement that barely covered lawyers' fees, after my ex-husband spent the last 3 years of it quietly bleeding our joint accounts into a business partnership he never told me existed. I didn't have much left. I had this building, a used pickup truck, and a stubborn belief that I could still build something with my own hands instead of relying on anyone else's promises again. I called out, thinking maybe a contractor had let himself in early. "Hello? Who's there?" Nothing answered. Just the settling creak of an old building and dust motes catching the light through broken windows. Then I heard it again, not one voice this time, but the unmistakable shuffle of feet, more than one set, somewhere down the east hallway where the old kindergarten rooms used to be. I walked toward it slowly, heart hammering, and found a door that had been recently propped, not with rust and neglect, but with a folded piece of cardboard wedged fresh under the frame. Inside, 4 children looked back at me. The oldest, a girl who couldn't have been more than 12, stepped in front of the younger 3 like she'd done it 100 times before. "Please don't call anyone," she said. "We don't exist. Not on paper. If you call anyone, they'll come split us up, or worse." I didn't understand yet what she meant by, "we don't exist." I didn't know that sentence would lead me somewhere far darker than an abandoned building and a bad real estate deal. Somewhere involving a man I used to trust completely, records that had been deliberately altered, and a truth about my own settlement that I hadn't uncovered yet. But standing in that dust-covered kindergarten room, looking at 4 children who'd apparently been living inside my new building for who knows how long, I knew one thing clearly. Whatever led them here, I wasn't calling anyone until I understood exactly what "erased from records" actually meant. I'd married Desmond Okafor at 23, back when I still thought stability was something you built once and kept. We didn't have kids together, a fact that used to feel like grief and eventually became the only clean thing about our divorce. 20 years of marriage, a shared contracting business, a house in Kettering we'd renovated with our own hands, and somewhere in the last 3 years of it, Desmond had quietly opened a second set of business accounts under a partnership with a man named Roland Pace, moving money out of our joint finances a little at a time so I wouldn't notice the pattern until it was too late to stop. By the time I found out, during the divorce discovery process, there was almost nothing left to divide. My attorney called it financial erosion, a term that sounded clinical for something that felt like watching your own house get quietly disassembled around you while you slept in it. I didn't fight for the business. I didn't fight for the house either in the end. I let Desmond keep it in exchange for a smaller but faster settlement, mostly because I couldn't afford the legal fees to drag the fight out longer. What I walked away with was enough to buy one thing outright: the old Millbrook Elementary building, listed for next to nothing at a county auction because nobody else wanted the liability. I told myself I was building a second act. Loft apartments, exposed brick, the kind of adaptive reuse project that could actually turn a profit if I did the renovation work myself and hired selectively for the parts one couldn't. I had no idea, walking in with my inspection checklist that first morning, that the building already had occupants who'd been living there through most of the winter. Roland Pace, Desmond's business partner, had grown up 2 streets over from Millbrook Elementary, a detail I only learned later and initially dismissed as coincidence. At the time, all I knew was that the 12-year-old girl standing in front of the other 3 children, she told me her name was Naomi, refused to explain anything beyond that single sentence: "We don't exist, not on paper." I didn't call the police that first day. I know how that sounds now, looking back, but Naomi's fear wasn't performative. It was the kind of fear that comes from a child who has learned exactly what happens to kids like her when the wrong adult gets involved too fast. I brought them food from my truck instead, sat on the dusty classroom floor, and asked her, gently, how long they'd been staying there. "Since September," she said. "Our mom used to bring us here when things got bad at the motel. She said this place was safe because nobody comes here anymore." I asked where her mother was now. Naomi looked at the 3 younger kids beside her, then back at me, and said the sentence that changed the entire shape of what I thought I was walking into. She's been gone since November. We've just been taking care of each other. I sat on that classroom floor for a long time after Naomi told me her mother had been gone since November, doing math I didn't want to do. 4 months. 4 kids, ages 12, 9, 7, and 5, according to what Naomi eventually told me, surviving on food she scavenged from a nearby church pantry and whatever she could carry back from a gas station 2 miles away where a cashier sometimes let her take expired bread without ringing it up. Why didn't you go to a shelter? I asked her. We tried once. They said they'd have to call someone about our mom not being here, and then a lady started asking Micah, that's my little brother, questions about bruises he got from falling off his bike. We left before they finished the intake form. I wasn't going to let them split us up over a bike. That's when I understood what "we don't exist, not on paper" actually meant. Naomi told me their mother, a woman named Vanessa, had pulled all 4 kids out of school the previous year after a custody dispute with their father turned into a protective order that never got properly filed, and from that point forward, Vanessa had kept them almost entirely off any official record. No school enrollment, no updated address with any agency. Nothing that could be traced by a father Naomi refused to talk about beyond calling him dangerous. I called my attorney, Denise Okoro, the next morning, not to report the children yet, but to understand what my legal exposure looked like, and more importantly, what actually happened to kids in a situation like this if I did the wrong thing first. You cannot just keep them there, Renata, she said carefully. But you're right to be cautious. If their father is genuinely dangerous and the system moves too fast without understanding that, you could inadvertently hand them straight back to the person their mother was hiding them from. She connected me with a family law colleague who specialized in child welfare cases, a woman named Priscilla Vance, who agreed to meet with me and, eventually, carefully, with Naomi, off the record at first, just a conversation, no uniforms, no clipboard. While I waited for that meeting to get arranged, I noticed something that stopped me cold. Naomi had a school folder tucked in her backpack, worn soft at the edges, with her name and an old address on the front, an address 2 streets over from Millbrook Elementary. The same 2 streets over where Roland Pace, my ex-husband's business partner, had grown up. I asked her if she knew a man named Roland. Her face changed instantly, not fear this time, but recognition, sharp and immediate. That's my uncle, she said. My dad's brother. He used to come around before things got bad. He always said if we ever needed somewhere nobody would look, the old school was the safest place he knew. The coincidence I dismissed on day 1 wasn't a coincidence at all. I didn't confront Roland directly. Priscilla Vance advised against it, hard, the moment I mentioned the connection. If he's tied to the father, and the father is dangerous, tipping him off before we have a plan could put those kids at real risk, she said. Let me make some careful calls first. Priscilla's calls took 8 days, and in that time I kept the children fed, kept the building quiet, and kept telling myself I was doing the responsible thing by moving slowly. What I didn't expect was Desmond showing up at the building himself, unannounced, on day 6. Roland says you've got some kids squatting in your new building, he said, standing in the doorway like he still had a right to walk into spaces that were mine now. He's worried about liability. Thought I should give you a heads up before this becomes a problem. Since when do you and Roland discuss my property? Since he mentioned it's near where his brother's kids used to live. Small world, Renata. Maybe you should just call it in and let the system handle it instead of playing house with someone else's problem. The way he said it, someone else's problem, told me everything about what Roland had actually told him and what he hadn't. Desmond didn't know these were his own business partner's nephew and nieces. Or he did know, and was pretending otherwise to gauge how much I'd already figured out. 2 days later, Priscilla called with what her contact at the county child welfare office had found. Naomi and her sibling's father, Marcus Pace, had an active protective order violation warrant from 14 months earlier, filed by Vanessa after an incident that included a documented hospital visit for Naomi's younger brother, Micah, the same bike accident, bruises the shelter intake worker had questioned. Marcus had never been served. He'd simply moved, changed jobs, and Roland, his brother, had been quietly helping him stay ahead of the paperwork the entire time. Vanessa hadn't abandoned her kids by choice. Priscilla's contact found a hospital admission record from a Columbus facility, dated late November, an assault, unrelated to a car accident story Naomi had been told to repeat if anyone asked. Vanessa had been in a coma for 6 weeks before she died in January, and nobody had connected her identity to 4 missing children because she deliberately kept them off every record that could lead back to Marcus. Naomi had been protecting her siblings from a truth she didn't fully have herself. She thought her mother was still out there, coming back eventually. Nobody had told her otherwise, because nobody who knew had bothered to look for her. I sat with that information for a full night before I told Priscilla what I wanted to do next. I wasn't calling this in through the normal channels, not yet. Not with Marcus still unaccounted for and Roland already circling. I was documenting everything myself first, carefully, with an attorney, before anyone with a badge or a business card got anywhere near those 4 kids. Priscilla moved fast once we had Vanessa's hospital records and the outstanding warrant confirmed. She brought in a colleague who specialized in kinship and emergency guardianship cases, a woman named Odalise Ferreira, who walked me through exactly what documentation I'd need before anyone from the county got involved. Proof of the children's welfare while in my care, a written account of everything Naomi had told me, and formal notice to law enforcement about Marcus's unserved warrant, filed in a way that protected the kids' location until an actual arrest happened. It took 11 more days. Marcus Pace was arrested at a job site in Springfield, 30 miles away, still using his real name because he'd never imagined anyone would connect a warrant 14 months old to 4 kids nobody had reported missing. Roland was questioned separately about harboring knowledge of the children's whereabouts without reporting Vanessa's death or the outstanding warrant, though Odalise was honest with me that proving he'd broken any actual law, rather than just behaving reprehensibly, would be difficult. He wasn't charged. He lost his business partnership with Desmond within the month, though. Desmond, to his credit once he understood the full picture, cut ties immediately and gave a full statement to Priscilla's investigator about what Roland had told him and when. Vanessa's death was formally confirmed through the coroner's office, and Naomi finally learned the truth. Not from a stranger, not from a case file, but from me, sitting on the classroom floor where she told me everything else, holding her hand while she cried the kind of crying that comes from finally being allowed to stop being strong for a minute. The county placed all 4 children with me as emergency kinship-adjacent guardian while a formal custody and adoption process began, since I had no biological or legal relationship to them but a documented, verifiable care and Naomi's own testimony about trusting me. It wasn't instant, and Odalise warned me from day one it might not work out in my favor. The process took almost 8 months, home studies, background checks, court dates, a guardian ad litem interviewing each child separately multiple times. I kept renovating the building through all of it, slower than planned, because now half of it needed to become an actual home instead of loft apartments. It's been a year and a half since that first morning with the keys in my hand. Naomi is 13 now, sharper and steadier than any 13-year-old should have to be, though she's finally allowed to just be a kid some days instead of a substitute parent. Micah's bruises are long healed, and he's back in school full-time, catching up on 2 years of missed enrollment with a tutor twice a week. The 2 younger ones, Della and Theo, still ask sometimes if their mom is coming back, and I've learned there isn't a perfect answer to that question. Just an honest one, delivered gently, as many times as they need to hear it. The custody process finalized 4 months ago. I'm their legal guardian now, with an adoption petition moving through family court that Odalise expects to finalize by spring. Marcus is serving time for the protective order violation and the assault that put Vanessa in the hospital, once investigators connected the 2. Roland moved out of state. I don't know where, and I've stopped needing to know. Desmond and I talk occasionally now, mostly about logistics. He still owns half the old house in Kettering, technically, some settlement paperwork we never fully closed out, but something shifted in him after Roland. He apologized once, genuinely, for the money he took and for not looking harder at who he was doing business with. I accepted it without pretending it fixed anything. Some apologies just clear space instead of repairing what was broken. The building isn't loft apartments anymore. It's home, 4 bedrooms carved out of old classrooms, a kitchen where the teacher's lounge used to be, and a hallway where 4 kids I'd never planned on raising now race each other to the door every afternoon. I lost almost everything in that divorce. I never expected what replaced it to matter more than anything I'd lost. Tell me what you would have done in my position.